Welcome back to some new r/PettyRevenge stories. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Son of a Friend. I'm a seamstress. Before getting this job, I did freelance sewing jobs for extra cash and to maintain my skills. Since I've been hired, I'm not allowed to sidekick services offered by the shop, and I would be immediately fired if my boss found out. This is my dream job, and I will not, under any circumstances, jeopardize this opportunity. A good friend called me to ask if I could help her son, a grown man, with an alteration that I do a ton of at work. Said he needed a new zipper on his jacket. I explained that I'm not freelancing from my living room anymore, and to have him come by the store for an estimate, and we'd get him sorted out. He comes in and is told word for word by my boss, like we discussed the other day. This would be $35 plus $5 for the new zipper. The jacket in question is actually a Carhartt winter work coat, and replacing that zipper is not the same 20-minute task as turning a pullover hoodie into a zip-up. Also, even if I were still doing sewing jobs from home, I don't have an industrial machine capable of making that job easy, and I would have charged him at least $50, so $35 is an extremely reasonable price. Well, I didn't know that he had already been a few days before and been told the same price, which is apparently when he got mad and asked his mom to ask if I could do it for him. When he heard the price wasn't changing just because I'm friends with his mom, he started in with, $35 for a zipper is outrageous. My mom could do it for so much cheaper. I can't believe you charged that much for just a zipper. Blah blah blah, and other general rudeness. Side note, his mom didn't know it was a Carhartt. Doesn't even own a sewing machine and would have to do it by hand, and he would have to mail it to her in a different state. So he storms out and everyone just looks at me and says, well, that was embarrassing. And we all get back to work, but I am seething. How dare he come into my job and behave like that after having his mom call me as a favor. I called his mother back and explained exactly what he'd been told and how he acted towards us. She said he told her that they'd quote him $60 for the new zipper, so now he's been caught lying as well. She said, he will definitely be hearing from me about this. I did not raise him to be such a jerk, and that behavior is unacceptably rude. Don't even worry about him. I'm going to handle it. I've known them for years, so I know he's not escaping that conversation. I hope he enjoys getting royally chewed out by his parents and still not having a functioning zipper. I'm looking forward to when he inevitably comes crawling back to apologize after he finds out his mom won't be hand sewing that zipper for him. And the one or two other places around that do alterations charge a fair bit more than we do. The next story is called Rent Referral. When my wife and I were starting out, we had a little old rental house downtown that we leased to male students. When we moved out of the country for a job, I figured it would be easier to rent to one family rather than chase around 6 separate broke students for rent. The first family that we put in there turned out to be a bad choice on my part. Misty was fine for the first 4 months or so. When I visited in person, the house was noticeably getting gross. They weren't taking care of things. This might have been somewhat forgivable, but then Misty stopped paying rent on time. To make matters worse, there was a plumbing issue that sounded expensive. The toilets were backing up, and sewage was soaking the carpets in the basement. The whole place stank. I didn't even know why. The plumber ran a camera down the pipes to see what was happening. He informed me that the clog was a result of a buildup of needles. I opted to pay $1,000 to have them use high pressure to flush out the system. Unfortunately, my house was nearly 100 years old, so the high pressure destroyed the clay connector to the city's sewage system. The only way to fix it was to shut down a major residential road and dig to it for $30,000. Insurance wasn't in a hurry to pay either. I didn't have that kind of cash sitting around at the moment, and Misty was still in there. I wanted to evict Misty, but it would be a long process, and I knew that she would fight tooth and nail to stay, as she didn't want to go back to her parents, who lived just down the street. By this point, my house resembled a hoarder's home, and I suspected that things were being dealt there. Rather than evicting Misty, I called the health department, because they were living with no running water and a porta potty that they rented in the backyard. It was gross. They also had 2 kids there. It took a visit from a team of sheriffs to get her out, and only well after the property was condemned. When Misty finally did leave, she left about 100 pounds of rotting meat on the front lawn. She also left the house a giant mess and stole many of my things. I was so relieved that she was gone that I almost didn't care. She was a major source of stress in my life and in my marriage. It ended up taking several hundred hours and over $50,000 to fix up the house. Eventually, insurance came through for part of it. I tried not to be resentful about the situation. There wasn't anything that I could feel good about doing to her. She was already doomed to live poorly based on her own choices. By this point in life, I felt like I was above petty revenge. Besides, she had 2 kids. Oddly, Misty had the gall text me to ask for a character referral for a new place, since she didn't have anyone else. I was dumbfounded, but texted back a thumbs up. Maybe I could save the next guy. Eventually, I did get the call from the next guy asking about Misty. He was a jerk to me on the phone. He was talking over me and talking down to me. He was an expert landlord doing his due diligence, etc. I tried to get my story about Misty in, but then I paused. I listened to him talk down to me some more, and then I waited until it was my turn. I told him, you know, Misty was great. I had some major plumbing issues. Otherwise, she'd still be with me. Also, she's got a cute family. Misty got the place and thanked me. Then I never heard from either of them again. The third story is called All Over $50. One afternoon, I was working the first shift of a double and was in the back putting some things away from delivery when I heard our other server looking for me. I popped my head out of the storage area and she told me I had a large table come in. We also had another server who was on work release from the local jail and was known to tell them she was working a double and then go hang out at the motel behind the place with her boyfriend and then come back an hour or so before she was supposed to be picked up by the cops. I went out and found our jailbird getting the table settled, which was a pretty normal occurrence if someone was stalking as our job required. When we met at the drink machine, I thanked her for seating them and told her I had it from there. She told me no. She said she was helping them, even though they were in my section. She was the senior server, no such thing, and it was her choice. We were also changing sections for the next hour. I told her no, we were not, and I would take care of the table in my section. She went and cried to our cook for the night, who decided not to get involved, typical, and told me to just let it go. If you weren't waving a 6-pack of beer in front of the cook, you didn't exist. So I wasn't surprised when she declined to settle the argument. I backed off the table but refused to switch sections. The table left a $50 tip, practically unheard of in our little corner of the world. I was a student at the time, and that $50 could have paid for a pair of books I needed for a class. As it was, I was leaving with $23 and change that night. Yay. This also happened to be one of the nights when she decided to tell the cops that she was working a double. Not long after the table left and shift 1 ended, so did she. Her partner picked her up. She told the cook to call her if anyone came looking for her and left a room number. Sure enough, an officer comes in. Seems no one told him she was working a double. He was there to pick her up. Since we were busy, we didn't actually see him come in and didn't notice him until he asked where she was. It didn't take him long to figure out she was not in the building. Word was put out that she was considered escaped and to be looking for her, her partner, and anyone known to associate with her. Immediately, a plan formed in my head. Before she left, she'd made each of us promise not to tell anyone, especially the police, where she was. I agreed, just to shut her up, thinking it was going to be like every other time she'd done this. Stupidly risky, but utterly harmless. And, besides, not my clown, not my circus. As soon as I got home a few hours later, I told my mother I had a moral dilemma and told her what was going on with my coworker. My mother did exactly what I knew she'd do. She grabbed the phone, called the sheriff's department, and reported that there was a woman staying in the hotel behind the restaurant who she knew they were looking for, and then proceeded to give them the room number. At work the next day, I got to hear all about how a half-dozen department cars rolled up in front of their room at midnight, busted the door open, and arrested both of them in their underwear. Her work permit was revoked, and she spent the rest of her sentence trying to figure out who ratted her out. When she was finally released a year or so later, I was completely honest and was able to tell her to her face that no, it was not me who turned her in that night. I never called the cops and I never told them what room she was in. Hope that $50 was worth it. The last story is called Customer Service. 2 weeks ago, I set off on our long-time dream trip on my motorbike. About 4 days in, I woke up to enormous amounts of rain. I've never seen it rain that hard. I checked the weather apps and the news, and apparently I was in the middle of a severe rainstorm that I had somehow missed. It was going to rain hard for at least 3 days. I did not have time to wait it out, because I would be short on time to reach my goal. According to the forecast, I needed to do about 800 kilometers to get out of the rain. This means riding all day, only stopping for gas in the pouring rain. My bike is 40 years old, so not that quick either. Now luckily I brought some good rain gear. However, with this rain I was still soaked within the hour. I decided to keep pushing as long as I could. I was already soaked anyway. What's gonna happen? Get soaked though? The cold was starting to get to me, and I was nearing my breaking point when out of nowhere I saw this bike shop. Kinda hipsterish biker fashion and gadgets, all that. I noticed they have a coffee bar, so I pull up, park my bike and walk inside. As I'm standing there, shaking from the cold so bad I can't even unlock my phone, I asked if I could please order a coffee. I didn't say I intended to pay, but that was totally the plan. No, coffee is only available for customers, was the clerk's reply. I knew this dude could not be a biker. A biker would not deny another biker a simple cup of coffee in this situation. Okay, I say, trembling still. I'll take the t-shirt, XL please. I hand him some red banknotes and ask if I can have that coffee now. He reluctantly makes me one, and I savor every last little drop. I ask for another one, and to my surprise, he makes it for me. I drink the second cup, feel a bit warmed up, and have finally stopped shaking. I get up from my table and walk back over to the counter with the shirt. Hello, I would like to return the shirt. Not really my style after all. Could I get the money back? And the dude gives me back the money. He doesn't seem to realize I just played him. So I add a, thanks for the coffee. Great customer service, as I leave. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.